Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Jogan1701, and yes, after spending last Wednesday at a Weather Spotter course, I am back and ready to talk Foundry. So, as our 50th episode, we decided to do something special and invite all different kinds of people from the Foundry community. So we have with us tonight the usual cast of Hippiejohn, Greendragoon, and Markhawkman. We also have Cerberusfilms, Realm Time, Paxfederetica, Castmodean, Bazag, SirBoulevard, and Primar.
Yay!
I refute the implication that you are tame.
Am I allowed to be unmuted?
And there was much...
No, Realm. No, you're not.
Rabble.
So we're not going to do our usual segments tonight. We're just going to have just kind of a series of discussion topics and just kind of see where everything goes. Hippiejohn, why don't you start us off with your topic?
I was thinking when I realized we were going to have a lot of different storytellers that come at storytelling from a whole lot of different angles of this as a topic, which is why Star Trek? What about storytelling in the universe of Star Trek keeps you coming back again and again to keep telling stories in this universe? What makes you use this as the lens you choose to explore whatever part of the human condition you're exploring? So why Trek? Despite the fact that sometimes there are roadblocks, especially when we work with the Foundry, just throwing that out there is for anyone to talk about.
Well, I think for me, the reason I keep coming back to Trek is I think that Trek universe is very interesting. It's very dynamic, but there's also a lot of unanswered questions. See, I'm the kind of person who looks at this series and the opening motto is to seek out new life and new civilizations. And the question I always like to ask myself is, what about the civilizations we've already met? Or what about the civilization we will become? One of the Foundry missions I'm working on right now is not to seek out a new world, but to look at the strange new world that is Earth. I think that I come back to that universe because I enjoy getting the opportunity to see Trek from a different angle.
I know for me that at least when it comes to the Foundry, that oftentimes the challenges of the Foundry are part of the reason I come back. Just because, let's face it, Star Trek was all about the challenge and that seeking new life and exploring. So for me, it always kind of is what I've taken it this far, how far can I go? So that's always one of the reasons I always kind of try to come back. And do I have a nasty habit of trying to recreate things based solely on what people said can't be done in the Foundry?
I think for me, it's always been, I'm a writer by trade, but I'm not a TV writer, and I always kind of figured that this in the Foundry is probably the closest I'll ever get to actually writing for Star Trek. Actual TV show. I'm probably not ever going to be able to write for a Star Trek TV show. This is probably the closest I can get. And I just, love Star Trek since as long as I can remember. So it's just perfect. And I don't know, I'm always figuring out stories that can fit in this universe.
Well, I'm actually no stranger to writing for Star Trek even before Stowe. Back in '96, I actually wrote a spec script for Voyager. It never got accepted, but I like to think that it influenced certain episodes in the later seasons. And also, when Voyager ended, I was kind of dissatisfied with Endgame, as a lot of fans were, and so I wrote a short story basically devoted to Voyager's homecoming that we never got to see. I titled it Epilogue, and I should post a link to that somewhere on the forums or something one of these days. But Anyway, I'm no stranger to writing for Trek, so it just kind of came naturally to me once I discovered the Foundry.
Well, I suppose for me, what draws me back to Star Trek Online is just the variety of stuff the stories that can be told. I don't think any of my stories are actually that I've told in the Foundry are the same. I've got a scientific investigation, maybe two scientific investigations, a murder mystery type thing, funny stuff, more serious stuff, weird stuff, and some pretty serious stuff as well. So, I think that's particularly what I like about the Foundry is just the variety of stories that can be done.
For me, it's always been, well, to begin with, it was the fact that it's Star Trek, and I love Star Trek. I grew up watching Star Trek as a child, and the ability to create something that was part of that universe was just fantastic, because I'd always had ideas of what I'd want to do in Star Trek, how stories that I wanted to tell with it. But as time went on, it just became about telling stories in a fantastic universe. It didn't even matter that it was Star Trek. It was that you had the ability to create something that other people would play that was in an established universe. Okay, it was the Star Trek universe, but it was an established universe that you had so much background and depth and everything to draw on. You could also still talk to sorry, I'm rambling now, but it's the fact that you could get ideas from other people and interact with others and then create something new and wonderful from that. So it's not just the ideas that I had, it was being influenced by other people's ideas and then creating something better and messing around with the tool and making it fantastic. That's why I keep going back to the Foundry in Star Trek.
In my case, I'm one of those people where I would just automatically, while watching a TV show, kind of think up fan fiction ideas in the back of my head just because I was watching. And, I've actually written fan fictions for several different fictional universes. And, I play Star Trek Online, so, it just kind of sticks with me because of that.
So there I guess I'm hearing a lot of why people do it in the Foundry, and I guess for me the kind of answer Mark just touched on it in a way is that just I guess whenever you were watching anything or doing watching any sort of entertainment, you would like write a fan fiction for it in a way. And I guess for me the reason that kept happening in the Trek universe is because overall the Trek universe is a very hopeful place, so much so that exploring it as an author can be a very reaffirming and hopeful experience, I guess, which is why I keep coming back to writing stories and adventures within the Trek universe. So whether I'm doing that in the Foundry or whether I was doing that in short story form in some way, I'd still be doing it.
I think one thing that we hadn't brought up is why I keep coming back to building Foundry missions and in Stowe is part of it's been the community that has grown up around Foundry missions. I mean, from that very first time I jumped into the Starbase UGC chat room and talked to Castmodean, it's just been, this is my home, you might say. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I've even left it for times and I always seem to come back just because we just have a great community here in the Foundry.
Well, darn it, Drogon, I was going to basically say the same thing. The community is part of what keeps me coming back. Just all these people I have met over the last couple years, and the ideas they come up with, and it's sort of how things like Purity came about. Just the throwing around ideas. The hey, we can do that. We can do that as well as. Well, we think we can. Let's see if we can do it. Years later, there we go. We did it. Now we need somebody else to do the next big thing.
That's the question right now, isn't it? Is what's the next big collaborative project? I know there's been some ideas put out there.
Me and Sutherland were talking earlier today. Maybe we should do a KDF one.
Well, we'd love to see that. I'd love to see it from authors who did not have their names on Purity, so you get the good variety and cool stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd love to see a project in the KDF side. Yeah, if I hear about it, I'll be waiting for it and play every mission that came out for it.
Yeah,
Because
I
the
definitely
KDF is missing.
I'd definitely be interested in helping write a mission series for KDF.
I'm going to just say this as a KDF author. Part of the reason I get stuck doing when I try to do a Starfleet mission is there's a lot more rules and stuff you have to confine to. There's a lot more source material. There's a lot more things holding you back. And I think definitely with the Klingons and the Empire, and the fact that most of the races in the we got the Klingons who are well developed, but it's still left pretty vague. And the rest of the species were at best one-offs. So there's a lot more room to maneuver, and I think that's a good future.
I don't think there are that. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that just gives us more opportunities. So I hope if we do a project like that.
Yeah, I have to agree there because, you have all these different races that have been seen in the KDF, like the Lethians, that the TV show never explored in any detail at all.
I don't think that necessarily means that the fact that Starfleet is more, if you're doing a Starfleet mission, that you're more limited by rules or anything. The way I see it is you've got more established stuff that you can just take and then go from there. Whilst I see that in the KDF, like with what I'm doing a KDF mission. Well, I have been for a while. I still haven't got around to publishing it. Like I'm actually struggling to make it because there's not that material that I can just go, oh, well, this does this, blah, blah, blah. So you have to really create it, and I'm worried about creating it because then, there's so much created about there's so much stuff that fans have created, or there's soft canon, all that jazz for the KDF. But because there's so little hard canon and such, I'm always worried about someone going on and saying, yeah, but that's not right, just because I didn't know what something was. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist that way, that I want to make sure that whatever I put down is actually the correct canon, even if I'm making something up, if that makes sense at all.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of it. I just did a 3-part series, and the first race I focused on were the Ferocans. And there is nothing on them besides what Stowe has written. And the same thing kind of applies, there's almost nothing on the Nausicaans other than they're pirates. Well, what's their real society like? Even in the expanded universe, they don't really touch on that. The Lethians all we know about them is that they're telepathic. We don't really know much about them beyond that. The Gorn and Orions and the Klingons are the only ones who really got any focus. So it's not a case of, I know that I had that same concern when I first started out. I was like, oh my god, I don't want to contradict things. But when you get down and you see how few facts you actually have, you end up going, okay, I can work this in and I can expand from there. And it just is little bits. And by the end of it, you realize those like 5 facts that have been confirmed in expanded universe have turned into 300 facts that you made up. So I don't. So I think I understand it's scary, but once you get into it, you don't even realize how absolutely amazing it is to kind of write the stories from the ground up based on someone else's little bits and pieces.
So what our next topic was going to be is, and we're transitioning a little bit, but it's sort of related, is where do you guys go for ideas? You know, we've heard from some people.
Oh, I think we had a bit of a hiccup there.
Hello.
Who spilled
Hey.
coffee on the console?
Are we back?
Yeah.
What just
I
happened?
spilled soda.
Okay.
The joys of life.
I think that was a hiccup on Drogon's end.
Okay. I think it was.
3 red chips are dead now.
Okay, we have CaptPFDennis.
I think it was
joining
me.
us. It was obviously his fault.
I crashed the party.
We'll let him stay anyway. Okay, so our next topic was going to be, we've had some people in the forums say over the years, you know, I would do the Foundry, but I don't have an idea. I can't figure out an idea for a mission. So where do you guys get your ideas from?
I suppose for
I
me,
never stop having them.
sometime.
Go ahead, Baz.
Some.
Let the guy with the knife go first.
Sometimes, yeah. If you're having a hard time coming up with ideas, then I think it's a really good idea just to absorb yourself in the source material. Like my first ever Foundry mission, Starfleet Experimentation, was actually came into existence because I was watching The Naked Now and realized that Star Trek didn't really have a lot of those type of scientific, non-combat explorations. So that's where I've got my first idea from, and there are a lot of ideas, things that have been mentioned or things that haven't been further explained in the TV shows, in books, in movies that you can pick up as grains and just develop from there. And so yeah, so just if you are having a hard time, I recommend just watching as much Star Trek, reading as much Star Trek, or just reading in general, because the stories are always perhaps. I think you can always incorporate stories from other settings as well. Just Trekify them.
That's what I always do, or I should say tend to do, is draw from whatever I happen to be watching. I just, I'm watching something or reading something, and I think to myself, oh, that would make a good Foundry mission. I mean, I just had one, I was reading a book called The Monuments Men about guys who were trying to find the stolen art and protect monuments in World War II in Europe. And I thought, oh, the Federation's probably going to have something like that. In all these war-torn areas, they're going to have a unit that's going around trying to protect all the art and cultural relics and all that kind of stuff. So that could be a Foundry mission.
Yeah, they have to protect them from both winning party and the Ferengi.
Yeah,
Well,
from the Ferengi.
One of the novels that I found to be rather interesting, simply because it goes someplace where Star Trek normally doesn't go, was actually one of those inter-universe crossover episodes or books that clearly did not take place in the same parallel reality as any of the rest of Star Trek, but it was a crossover between TNG and the X-Men. It's just one of those things where the crew of the Enterprise happened upon a planet where the people of the planet were having issues similar to what you see in the X-Men comics, and they needed the X-Men to help them with figure out how to solve the problems.
So, I mean, thinking back, especially in framing on the question of advice for new authors, back before I started getting into the Foundry. I mean, I kind of watched the Foundry for a very long time and never got into it because I couldn't think of any idea. As like what do you do for an entire mission? And I got to say, it wasn't until I actually got over that and sat down in the Foundry and started playing around with it that the ideas really started to flow for me. I mean, sitting down, figuring out what maps you can work with. Well, how could this be used? What could we do with that? Well, that looks interesting. That sort of thing.
I don't know any of my stories in the Foundry until I actually get in making them. Like pretty much like you just said, I create my story as I go along making the maps, which is horrible because I end up with essentially feature creep, and it just expands and becomes massive and stupid, and then it all centers around something that just breaks horribly because I don't really care about the bugs that much. So yeah, I find it fun that way.
Yeah, and then like a year later, and you still haven't put out the second part.
Well, we have yet to see the first part from Serb, but that's neither here nor there.
I was about to counter that argument and say that I have 7 missions published, and then I found out the other day that actually 5 are unpublished. So yeah. I did fix those missions.
You got to check those things after a big republish.
Yeah, I must have missed one at some point. Well, no, I republished, like, they survived 2 of them. And then I must have just missed one of them. I was like, okay, right, well, I need to go fix those.
For me,
So-
I'm
horrible too as well.
Boulevard, go.
okay. For me, when coming up with story ideas, I kind of come from both schools of thought. When I initially started writing Honor Frossa, it was coming from the fact that I was playing a Frossan. My main character in KDF is a Frossan. And I was sitting there. I've read Larry Niven's known space novels, so I know their origins as Kazinti and so forth. And I was sitting there and I was going, you know what would be interesting? I really hope the Frossans go a different way from what their source race was. And I was thinking there, like, okay, well, what's some base similarities that we did see in the TV show that we could change and then apply it into the KDF, and then with the change facts that Stowe has written in. And then as I was writing along, and I ended up having writer's block at one point because I had literally just done the Frossa map and had written all this lore, and I went, okay, what am I doing? And it wasn't until the winter event came along and they had that EPO researcher that irritated everyone to death. And those of you who played the mission know where I'm going. That I said, now I really want to punch that girl in the face. And I went, and it was the next day I had gone into Foundry. I went, wait, we have EPO costumes, and I went, oh, well they did do genetic engineering, huh? And I just kind of went from there. It was a case of just something else in the game inspired me when I had reached a block, and I think that was something that I've kept since then, was looking at things and going, okay, well, here's the part of STL lore that's interesting. How can I build on that? Or this is a part that really irritates me. How can I fix that or have a consequence from it?
That's something I always think about when I see forum posts saying, you know, I wish we had X story in there. Or why doesn't our missions do this? Or why didn't my character be able to do this? It's like, oh, you know, make a Foundry mission. And then you can. You can make a Foundry mission that's entirely for your own character and a storyline you wanted to see. I think that's a legit use of the Foundry. Obviously, I mean, it doesn't have to be for other players.
It's a totally legit use of the Foundry.
Yeah.
Well,
I often make my missions for myself.
I think that's honestly the best way to work the Foundry, is if it's something that you want your character to go through, there's a good chance that it's something that someone else in the game will enjoy playing as well.
Well, and I mean, the big thing is inspiration is everywhere. I mean, in game, a great example would be Divide Imperia. Havraha got completely cheesed off with that, and he wrote a completely new version of it. Not that I can blame him in the least. I mean,
No.
I mean, outside of the game, political corruption, infighting, that sounds like a great inspiration for a series of episodes. what's going
Yeah.
on in the world in general. I mean, Star Trek has always been about putting the lens of social commentary on a futuristic setting. So I mean, you're not limited anywhere into what you can other than what is stated in the end user license agreement.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
got to
Yeah,
throw that caveat in there. But
Yeah,
I mean,
I say thank you,
otherwise,
Cass, because I mean, that's the biggest thing that Trek has always been about, at least for me. So when I'm thinking about telling Trek stories, I'm often trying to think of something that I want to talk about, and how do I talk about it through the lens of, in my case, often a cartoon or a
I
science
was going to
fiction story
say,
or a Trek story, or
yours usually involve sugary sweet cereals on Saturday morning.
But you know, hey, as the reviewer on your own program says, mine really is about three strong female protagonists being, just that's kind of the point of the thing. Like it's presented, yes, as a cartoon and through the lens of like a goofy sci-fi thing, but that, you hit the nail on the head. That's what Trek is best at. It lets us talk about things in an interesting and fun way.
That's
And
what all sci-fi is about.
Yeah,
it
That's
is.
what it has been about.
Well, and I think in particular right now, we really need Trek to be making these statements, probably more than ever. And it's a period in which we're only getting, one movie every 4 years, and it's not even social commentary. And I think right now the Foundry really needs to step up and do this. I was thinking the other day, I would love to get the community together and maybe do a series that's a holodeck recreation of World War III, and seeing how that came from the events that are happening today, like for instance with the invasion in Crimea and stuff. That these events, to make those statements with this, of saying these are the effects you're going to have with the actions that are being taken today. And I think right now the world is in such a place, we really need Trek to be there, and we don't have it. And it's our duty as Foundry authors, I think, to step up and to make those statements.
Okay, Drogan, you need to record that little bit and send it off to Van Critters.
Yeah. Well,
we talk on Twitter, so yeah, I'll send it to him.
You're welcome to convince him to watch the show too.
Really, all we do is stand around roundish tables.
And today we got an oblong.
Yes,
My
but it's the
Ghost
most
of War
interesting roundish
series-
table around.
My Ghost of War series took a lot of twists and turns before it got to the form that it's in now. But one thing it does a lot is it basically follows on from different threads in the cryptic storyline, particularly the Romulan, the Davidian, and the Cardassian True Waste storylines from the game. And that's where I got my original inspiration for that. And then when Legacy of Romulus came out, it turns out that backstory happened to dovetail quite nicely with the backstory that I had written for Ghosts of War. So that was basically the genesis of my Valley of the Shadow trilogy that I'm working on now. And once I'm done with that, at some point later this year, I'm planning on doing a Klingon trilogy, but that one's going to harken back not to the game, but to a kind of a throwaway line from a DS9 episode where Kira and Worf are talking about religion, and Worf says that the Klingon gods are dead because Klingon warriors slew them 1,000 years ago. So that's basically, so my story is, my KDF trilogy that I'm playing is basically going to be about that your crew is you and your crew are basically the warriors that slew the gods 1,000 years ago.
That's something that Cryptic has been very good about, is, taking throwaway lines and, one-off races from the shows and weaving a new story around them and greatly expanding them. That's something we can do as well.
And yet I don't have the Shellyak.
Those would be so much fun.
I have to say, I feel sorry that if they ever decide to bring the Sherlock game, my deepest sympathy goes to the character artist who has to make that model.
That is true.
That said, I mean, Tholians became a physical thing.
My only question about this Cheliac is that they wouldn't be very, wouldn't be a very particularly interesting MMO race to fight. I don't think, seeing they're all legalistic and treaties and all that sort of stuff.
But think about the diplomatic points for it. You could have an entire series where you get just diplomatic XP.
That's true. I was also thinking they might be very legalistic about how you fire your weapons. So any battles you have with them, they fire off a different weapon that disables a certain ability if you fire off said ability. So they're legalist.
Another thing, one of the few things we know about Sheliak and their technology is that the Sheliak have a considerable radiation resistance. So, it could be a race that specializes in radiation manipulation techniques.
See, Cryptic, are you listening?
We hope.
Diplomatic missions,
So
radiation
in game
resist.
terms, that would be what, damage over time. That would be debuffs. That would be that sort of stuff.
Resistance to a lot of skills.
I see that being a mix of the Romulans and the Tholians. That would probably be how they would end up feeling like.
They would be annoying as all hell, is what they would be.
Hell yes, they would.
To fight against.
But it'd be fun.
They would be a control shutdown race, is what they would be.
So hey, science emphasis.
Radiation to overwhelm sensors, to overwhelm shields. Feedback.
That would actually be interesting. Put the Sheliak against the Tholians. See irritation versus irritation.
Then we can just play out more of those interesting scenarios in the Foundry. Just have fleets of ships coming in and fighting each other.
Because of course that's the other thing they've been pretty good about getting in the Foundry is the new enemies each time they add them to the game itself. Mm-hmm. We were talking before the show about them adding ships. But they also add races.
I've only they added the actual contacts as well.
Sometimes that takes a little longer.
Yeah.
They finally did get the Tholians in. We've got costumes for the Voth ships in the costume creator, so we can make contacts for those, but no ground contacts.
I'm still waiting for them to bring in some of the creature mobs from the Legacy of Romulus, like the Day One arthropods. I wanted to use them in Valley of the Shadow too. I want to be skinning some other creature instead.
There's a few of the new Romulus creatures in the Foundry. We got the Epos, the Hatham, and the Nanovs.
Those Epos work for Tal Shiar, I tell you.
Yeah,
I think it's the other way
But
around.
they're so cute.
Hey, steal some buffs.
They're actually the Icodians, so be careful.
Guys, the Iconians did it.
Or the Voth did it and stuck lasers on their heads.
Yeah, had to go there, didn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what, we were talking about where you get your ideas from. Sometimes zone chat can give you ideas. I think Relum has actually done this mission now, but one time I got an idea to do a mission. This is before it was possible because we didn't have EPOs in the Foundry. These two guys were going on, and they were just weaving this story just in zone chat and just having fun with each other about how EPOs were secretly going to take over the universe.
Yeah, and then I made it when they came out with the Epos costumes.
Mm-hmm.
I made Epos where they worked for the Tal Shiar.
Yeah.
Intelligent Epos.
and then I made Honor of Rasa, and they started breathing fire too. So
I'm just
Epos
amazed
are
that
evil.
the zone chat is so coherent that you managed to get an actual story out of it.
Well, it wasn't ESP zone chat, I can tell you that.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay, that makes sense.
I was
sense.
out in the boonies in Tau Dewa or something. Zone chat. This was even before Legacy of Romulus came out. So yeah, I always wanted to do that mission. Never got time to do it.
But yeah, I personally have gotten some of my ideas from life experiences. You know, because I used to be in the military and everything, and even though there's a lot of stuff that I never did in the military, there's a lot of stuff I trained for, so I know how to do certain stuff. Like rescue 101 is, you know, you go in to rescue somebody. I've got training. We did a lot of drills like that, so I get ideas from what I experienced done in my life.
See, that just scares me because I know you could probably track me down and kill me now.
Let's face it,
It's too
anybody
expensive
could
to
do
go.
that.
The pond will not save you.
Yeah.
You have
I
a
can't
Twitter.
use
You tell
real-
everywhere where you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just have to follow your Twitter.
Yeah.
He's not quite as bad as Rogue Enterprise.
Oh,
I can track Rogue Enterprises where he eats every day, so he'd be really easy to kill with a bomb or something.
Yeah, Rogue is smart enough to lock his Twitter
Now you're
account.
going to details.
We'll just stick Baz on him.
This
You know,
concludes the Foundry Roundtable, so begins the Assassins Roundtable.
You know, Mark, I'm beginning to see your wisdom in not having a Twitter.
I actually was
It's
just found
because
one day
I've
because of my
never
Twitter.
gotten around to doing it.
You know,
That's a little
as long as you don't put like that stuff on there, like you don't have to hook up your phone. You don't have to hook it up to say where you've been. You can. That stuff's all optional. I don't get why people do that. Because that does
Seems
make
strange to
that.
me.
Yeah.
They get
It's like-
Well,
very
think
relaxed.
of it more as like the central computer keeping track of you, so that you can just go, computer, where is Cerberusfilms?
I'm behind you. Whoa.
The tweet is coming from inside the house.
Get outside the house.
Do you want to expand on that story?
Doobie doobie doo. Anyways,
All right. Why don't we move on to our next topic? This is, we've done some sort of abstract story stuff, but this is sort of a more mechanical thing. We have coming up, not this coming weekend, but the next weekend, the Foundry bonus. So what do you guys think of that, of how it's going to go? Good, bad, whatever?
I think it's gonna go bad because we got the mirror event starting tomorrow, and that's gonna be going through the weekend.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
No, that doesn't start tomorrow.
Yeah, it does.
starts in
Yeah,
April.
it does.
For 3 weeks. That was really bad planning.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
It
yeah, it
ends
starts
in
tomorrow.
April.
Oh, so it ends in April. I misread the...
But consider
Well,
this
actually-
though, that the mirror event though is going to be, you play it once, you get your things. Some people are going to live in it forever and ever, but not everybody.
Well, so you got to play it 15 times to get the full reward, right?
Yeah, but I'm
14
assuming that you're
14
playing
days.
it 15 days though. Not
15,
like
Well, unless you're
15
crazy
times
like
a
me
month.
and you have 15 alts.
and there are a lot of people who do that. So it's 15
other
days
thing-
per alt.
One other thing you're going to deal with a lot with the mirror event is that it is Vice Admiral only, and that's going to anger a lot of people. But it's also going to keep the blaze down, and you can get through it a lot faster, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
that's
the
unless
old Mirror
everybody's level
Universe
50.
stuff, while people liked to talk about how they would use it to level up their characters, low-level characters would get splatted left and right in the old Mirror Universe event.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just expected to die several times if I took a low level in there.
Yeah, and a lot of people were using it for grinding expertise, and I think the revamp of it is specifically to get people to go, no, PvE queues are not for expertise. I just kind of noticed that's been their trend. They're taking it out of, don't do an STF, don't do a 20-man event, go play a story mission or a Foundry mission to get your expertise.
Those are the best
Because
ways.
you get a
story.
truck
Anyway.
load.
They've said a few times in the past that they really want Foundry content and other story content to be the thing that you get the most bang for your buck out of. And they've said it numerous times on pretty much every podcast now.
Mm.
And so I hope that does become the case. It slowly, it was for a time, but then it was just exploited to hell. So hopefully, now that they're actually seem to be cracking down on exploits more, perhaps we're getting back to the point of them being able to give us more rewards back in, which will make people play again, and then they'll just come down with Iron Fist and all exploits.
No, I see the people going in and playing the same Foundry mission, like the quickest one they could find to get
That
the
will
bonus on the weekend.
But then it will stop being qualified. Then it will dip below
Yeah.
the time, which means it will stop.
Yeah.
So probably will get some people that will go and try and run through it. But
And of course, some of the more
hoping
popular
and expecting there won't
grinders
be
are not qualifying anymore.
Yeah, they're
exactly.
well, they're manually going in and turning those off, saying this one will never qualify.
Yeah. And then we assume banning accounts as well from that because they stopped, like the bots stopped.
But it's the question of implementation of this Foundry weekend. What do you guys think of that? It's going to be, what is it? You get an extra box of marks for qualifying missions?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, that's Foundry had its, even when people were using it for exploits, there were more people playing the Foundry for story missions when there was that extra bonus of, hey, I can get a couple of fleet marks while I'm at it.
Mhm.
Definitely.
We
Because
know
it's
there was a
something that they
big
could go and
protest when they
all
went
we can
away.
play Foundry missions and get fleet marks. I'm happy.
people
Yeah,
will go and play it and be like, okay, I'm actually having fun enjoying a story whilst also getting everything that I would from something that's mindless, something I've done millions of times before.
And the fact that they made it for only qualifying missions was a great way of saying, no, you're not going in and playing Admiral Bobo or something and getting those
Mhm.
marks too.
I think
I
it
There
would
like
is
have
the
been a
flip
good idea
side.
had they planned this during the judging period for the Foundry Challenge. You could have got a lot more people playing through
Yeah.
there and judging the missions, and it might have turned out a little better.
That's
I
a
think
good point, Rummer.
I think the question that you asked, Drogan, is how, really how I feel about the implementation, and it begs the bigger question for me, how I feel about the implementation of the weekends overall. I love seeing the Foundry get rewards attached to it for the weekend. I'd love to see the rewards like that be able to start getting attached on a broader scale than just on a weekend. But the question you ask really makes me think of the broader question of, how is this going to implement? And I say, all right, we're going to get a Foundry weekend where we get these bonus marks here. It's going to be months before we get such a thing again. This is going to happen 3, maybe 4 times a year for one weekend. How does that pay off? Like, so in terms of the mechanics of the situation, I'm not happy about it. Because I don't think that they're making these bonus weekends for whatever they're making the bonus happen for. I don't think that they're making them happen quickly enough. I don't think that the net benefit you get from the weekend in the time that you get to play for that weekend outweighs the fact that you're not going to see another weekend like it for 3 to 5 months. That's
Where are
that's
you
my
getting
answer.
that sort of?
How long? Look at how long it's already been.
They've been
For
doing this
each of
for
the
what,
types of
2
weekend
months?
events. For
And
2
they've
months,
and
we
they've
haven't
had
seen a
a
repeat.
different one each time.
Yeah, and we haven't seen a repeat. So my guess is at least 3 months. And if it's 3 months in 12 months of the year, that's 4 times a year that we're going to get to see the. I don't like the implementation of these weekend events, but I do like that the Foundry is getting.
Maybe if they moved it up to every weekend instead of every.
If they moved it something like
So-
that, I don't know
That
what
might be a
change
little
they
bit
need
better.
to make there, but
I am
I
Just
love
once a
the
month
Foundry
request.
getting. I love the Foundry getting attention and saying play the story based missions in the Foundry and get your marks that way. That is great. I love that. I don't love the way that they're putting it everything on the weekends now. So
So-
I
that's-
agree.
It's not actually just. Sorry.
I was gonna say, Hippiejohn, I kind of want to play devil's advocate to what you were saying, and you're right in that it doesn't happen very often. But I think the point of these weekends is not the rewards. I think the rewards are just the carrot. I think the real point is that 3 or 4 times a year, they will be able to advertise the Foundry. Be able to go up and say, hey, look at the Foundry. I think our biggest thing that we fight is that is simply people not actually knowing about it.
So you feel like the weekends are the carrot that they're using to lead people to specific
The
types of
rewards are the
content?
carrot. What their
Yeah, the
goal
rewards
is
are the
is to basically shine a spotlight on the Foundry. Now, if they did this like every weekend or every month, it would
lose its
not have
impact.
as big of an impact as, say, like once every 3 months. Because then it's
Right.
a special thing that happens, and people turn their attention to it.
Another thing
just real
too
quick,
to
guys. We're getting a lot of keyboard noise from somebody.
Yep.
Another thing to remember is that when Cryptic does these weekend events, they do an extended weekend, which is actually 5 days. So it's really more like a week-long event, minus
Just
Tuesday and
centered on the
Wednesday.
weekend. And I certainly don't mind it because I do have, I mean, it's just me personally being selfish. I do have more time to play on the weekends. So I don't mind that there's these different things because I like to do a lot of different things in game. And so, you know, I played the heck out of the double XP weekend. I played the heck out of the double dilithium weekend. And, you know, and then the rest of the time I'm just going back to whatever I feel like doing. So, I mean, it doesn't particularly bother me. I mean, I do see your point about the Foundry specifically, that, you know, it's going to bring a lot of people to the Foundry for that weekend, and then how many are going to stay and keep playing when that weekend is done? For certainly some. I don't know about a lot.
Well, and I think that goes back to what they're doing on Tribble. We talked about this earlier, that they're bringing back investigate officer reports, and so I think they're aware of that problem, and they're putting back in another carrot to say, hey, look, we know the Foundry's not like Marks or Dilithium or Expertise, which you need all the time. The Foundry, at the end of the day, really is one of the things that is more optional in the game. I'm not sure if that's the right word to use.
It's totally the right word.
Yeah, it's it's not something that, you know, it's put front and center, and so they need to put a little bit more of extra saying, hey, look, you can go do this and get extra stuff. And the Foundry rewards currently are just dilithium. Well, since Season 8 came out, we've had the Battle Zone, which rewards like 5,000 to 6,000 on just one run through. So there's really a need to finally just say, hey, look, here's some extra stuff for the Foundry.
And I think going back to the exploits being squashed thing that was mentioned earlier, I think they can put this extra stuff in because, well, the exploits are being squashed.
Yeah, they're finding a way to do it
Yeah.
finally.
Yeah, I don't think right now we can,
on the backlash list.
I think right now we can't say that Foundry's being neglected, because the Foundry's getting support that it's needed most desperately. It's needed to have the exploits squashed, and it's needed to have more attention drawn to it. They may not be giving us more tools, but they're giving us more longevity.
They have apparently
Yeah,
given us
definitely.
the Dyson chips, as was talked about a little bit earlier. They're
Don't
in
say,
the
otherwise
Foundry.
they'll take them out.
But it is the free. It is
They haven't done that in a while.
And they're actually already in game, and generally they only take things out when it's before it's in game.
Yeah, like the time ships.
Yeah.
Those
synthetic costumes and
the time ships we got back.
The time ships we got back. The Vesta is still broken though, but I think that might be a licensing issue with.
No, it's not a licensing issue. It just mean it breaks because the option was added, but not the actual physical model.
The lights were added.
Yeah, no, the skin wasn't added.
It's not properly hooked up.
It's the same thing with
the lights are on, but no ship's home.
Exactly.
The ship has
The Obelisk has that same problem right now.
Half
Yeah,
the
it's just
starships
that-
in there are just lights, or they're missing half of the ship.
Yeah. So let's shift gears here, and let's talk about the latest Foundry Challenge. How many of your guys are going to participate?
Yo,
when's the deadline again?
About 8
April
weeks from now.
16th, I think.
I think we're at 5 weeks
But
now.
I play right now already, and
I think we're at 5 weeks from the deadline now.
I'll knock something up and 24 hours. I might have a day sometime. I enjoy doing that every now and then.
Do a whole Foundry mission in 24 hours. That can be fun.
Yeah.
Baz and I did it in an hour. I'm sorry, well, was it an hour or 2 hours before? Bazag?
He is ignoring you. He doesn't.
I muted myself. Yeah, so, former Foundry community author Phil Bones did a contest where me and Sir were the only ones to enter to do a Foundry mission in an hour, and it was fun, but it was hardly polished.
It was interesting.
So what do you guys think of the topic? Obviously, I know exploration was one thing that people were asking a lot for. I think it's good to do community topics and pick from that, but obviously, you know, when your suggestion isn't picked, sometimes there could be hard feelings.
So I have no hurt feelings. You know, regardless. I think the only problem with the topic is one of the issues that the earliest challenges that Brand Flakes ran into is that it is super specific. The challenge we're going to see a lot of very similar we're going to see a lot of very similar stories. I think the challenges that Brandon ran got better when he stopped making them specifically follow this like line of story or whatever, and it's a little more specific than I like the challenges to be. That's all.
Well, personally, I don't really think the Mirror Romulans, what's happened with them is particularly detailed. But I think regarding going back to exploration, with being the mirror universe, this is a whole area that that has never been touched on in Star Trek before, and never in DS9 or Voyager or Enterprise, TOS.
Right.
Any of those shows that had mirror mirror universe episodes that we haven't heard anything about the Romulans. So this is in a way is a exploration of the mirror Romulans.
Yeah. Also, one thing I would like to point out is, I guess you say as a counterpoint to what Hippie said, is that as you keep going with making more and more challenges, you're going to have to become more specific because you'll run out of vague topics eventually.
Also, I really don't see how this is a specific brief. Literally, it's just saying what happened to the Romulans in the mirror universe. That's it.
For me, like the type of challenge that I would have been used to would have been write us a story about the mirror universe and give people
pretty
the
much
broad...
still what's. It doesn't have to be about the Remans or the Romulans. It's just what's going on Romulus. Like, it doesn't have to follow anyone in particular. He is just saying, okay, Romulus is a thing, so what's happening there? Or what? It doesn't. I mean, you could even touchstone it if you wanted to. You don't even need to really make it the mission about it.
You have to decide first off if the Earth Romulan War, how it turned out. I mean, Earth would have had a Constitution class starship at about the time the Earth Romulan War would have broken out. They would have stomped all over them.
It's actually interesting because they did talk about there's some mirror universe novels about the Romulans. There's not much on them, but they actually did discuss that at one point. They did I think it was a novel set in that period for Enterprise in the mirror universe, and the Romulans did get conquered. But what ended up happening is when the Terran Empire fell, they didn't go back to being the Romulan Star Empire. They changed. They became the Romulan Republic in that timeline. And then there's a throwaway line later on in another mirror universe novel that Romulus was destroyed by the Alliance with Thalaron weapons. So there's been this ironic kind of mirror to it before Stowe came out, because this is older material from like the mid 2000s, that the Romulan Republic formed in the 23rd century, ruled up until about the time of Nemesis, and then was destroyed. And so I think that's kind of an interesting mirror, that it's really an interesting potential if you just have those, if you have those facts, you can go 100 different ways. Okay, are we going back to having the Star Empire again, and we're having a reversal of what happened in the Romulan storyline in Stowe? Are they trying to rebuild? Have the Romulans completely collapsed? I don't think this is necessarily a case of it being overbroad. I think it's a case of, because two people mentioned in there they wanted Romulans and Mirror Universe, and when I get the feeling Smirk was digging around and saw that and went, huh, that's kind of a counterpart to our story. Let's hope that the writers in the Foundry can come up with a story.
And anything we write in the Foundry becomes their property anyway, so they can do with it as they wish.
Exactly.
Oh, thanks for reminding us of that.
They can steal from us legally.
Well, actually, no, but yeah, but no.
Technically, under the terms of the user agreement, we're giving it to them. They're not stealing it.
Yeah, we're giving it to them. I'm sure they would at least put our names on it somewhere.
Well, they do.
Yeah, I mean, you figure Datan would not have had Spock to mentor him and look up to. So who would he have turned to in his formative years, assuming his family even survived to that point? Would he be a pirate? Would he be a diplomat? Would he be a scumbag?
I don't know. I think you're making an assumption there. We don't actually know what happened to Spock after the fall of the Terran Empire.
Well, the anecdotal evidence is that Spock was assassinated and the Empire fell apart because of his reforms.
Well, no, we knew that the Alliance attacked the Terran Empire while Spock was kind of in charge, but it never says he was killed. It never says anything about him, only that his actions weakened the Terran Empire.
I actually like to kind of go with, especially now that we've gotten that Mirror Hakiv doc out for the upcoming Mirror Universe event. I was actually kind of thinking maybe Datan and Obasek, Hakiv, and Sela had their roles switched. In this timeline, Hakiv and Sela are much like how Datan and Karakek are on the Romulan side, while Datan and Obasek are like Hakiv and Sela are in the STO timeline. Kind of. Then you've got this kind of like Dark Mirror moment for a Romulan player who walks in and goes, "Oh my god."
There are a lot of things I think we do need in order to do this mission. I wish we had some of these mirror costumes more than just the original series and the next. There's only two Mirror Universe costumes: the original series and Enterprise. The only good thing we have is we have good and bad Reman and Romulan ground NPCs. We have both sets for both.
And space as well, I think.
Yeah, but any custom.
Yeah, Romulan Republic and Reman Rebellion, I think, is what they're labeled.
Well, the good thing is we don't have to skin other things, so we have Romulans fighting with phasers.
This is true.
Yep. However, if you're making any ground contacts, you're still going to be limited by the fact that we don't have any of the uniform options for Romulan or Remans.
Get to make up your own mirror uniform for them.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I'm going to have to go.
Well, the other thing we haven't mentioned yet, what's the mirror Tovin Kev like?
I wrote him into my mission. He's a boss battle.
He is the most loved in all of the universe.
He goes around by the name of President Awesome.
Yeah, he'd be the praetor.
Of course, we were talking also about Hakiv, and now that he's a DOF, Mirror Hakiv is a DOF reward from the new Mirror Universe event, and how many people were thinking about using him in their mission and are going to have to rewrite it because what is he? He's an astrometric scientist.
Mm-hmm. And he's just a duty officer.
And he's got a beard.
It's kind of like that episode where you see Picard in the blue uniform. When Q shows him what it would have been like if he didn't stand up to the Nausicaans.
Mm-hmm.
Short version, die horribly.
That was Tapestries, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, Tapestry. I kind of put a self-imposed challenge for me. I wanted to put in the mirror version of the Romulan player crew. And I remember one of my goals I wanted to make was I wanted Mirror Tovin. I mean, everyone hates Tovin just because he's mandatory and they can't get rid of him. But he's honestly a nice guy.
I like him. I really do.
I like him too. So my idea with making Mirror Tovin was I wanted to go in and have Mirror Tovin to be just this arrogant jerk you wanted to punch in the face. And one of the things I remember because I haven't finished writing his speech yet because it's going to take me forever. Is I wanted him to say, "Oh yeah, and I killed the Romulan player character because damn it, I'm getting power however I want it," and that just is so not our Tovin. And I wanted it to be at the end of it, like the player to just end up shooting him and being like, you know what, I'm glad I got this one.
Oh, come on. 90% of these Mirror Romulus missions are going to include killing Tovin Kev.
Mine will not
True.
include killing Mirror Tovin Kev.
Heck, one of my remastered Ghosts of War missions kills off Tovin Kev.
Everyone kills Tovin, but how many people get to write Tovin and Tovin talking to each other?
Oh,
I did
That sounds like a weird Rule 34 thing.
And then you turn to your Prime universe, Tovan Kev, and you say, "You better watch it, pal. You might be next."
Well, I want the extra step to make sure that Mirror Tovin was just even disgusting to him. So.
Okay, so that brings up a good topic of, are any of you guys going to have the player meet their mirror self, and how are you going to do it?
No, because I can't show mirror self, but I am going to have the player character assume control of the mirror version of his ship.
Actually, this raises an interesting question because you don't know whether the character that will be playing this will be a Romulan or not.
I always like to just put in a dialogue option string to just say, if you're Federation, if you're Romulan, do it that way.
I'm going to mark this as specifically for Romulan Republic characters, which isn't a guarantee that it's
That's what I
Romulan,
was going
but
to do.
See, I'm doing very specifically a Federation mission, and I'm doing very specifically that kind of you trade places with your mirror self. So while you're in the mirror universe having something happen, your mirror counterpart was here in the Prime universe. So I'm going to avoid you meeting them by using that.
I'm Captain Kirk.
I think I'll totally make Tovan Kev the Praetor. Praetor Kev.
That idea is hilarious.
You stole my idea.
No, you
went
make
with
his you make his sister Praetor.
I actually made Mirror Tovin a little more disturbing. I didn't make him the Praetor. What I did is I made Datan Emperor Datan, and Tovin is his consort. Because there's been
Sorry.
There's been that running joke in the community that we think Datan has to be gay or something. So I could see Mirror Tovin taking advantage of that just to seize power and to eventually stab in the back and take power later.
Yeah.
Something I've always found very strange about the whole mirror universe idea is that, okay, Earth, right? We had a massive war that basically decimated everything, bigger than World War III, in the Prime universe, in the main universe. So, how can all these people be alive? What's to say any of these characters that are in that are in the new Romulus, or in the Romulan expansion, any of those characters, what's to say any of them are alive?
Well, you're absolutely
Because
right. The odds are really low.
Everything is different. Exactly,
It was kind of a conceit that the original writers of Mirror Mirror and on into DS9 kind of had to go to, because I mean the probability would be that they wouldn't be alive.
Well, we do know of some specific differences though, because the Mirror DS9 episodes show that Tuvok never went to the Delta Quadrant.
But he still existed.
Yeah, but he was still there. He was still a person.
And it would seem to me that the further you get from
Jake
from
Sisko
the dividing point.
doesn't exist in the Mirror universe either.
Yeah, Jake Sisko.
And I don't think Zial exists either.
I would
so.
expect not. We never met Mirror Ducat, did we?
That's right.
Yeah, I don't. He might not exist either.
Never know.
He was probably a gardener.
But it seems like the further you get from the dividing point, the less similar it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not mathematically impossible that such a universe can come out and similar people appear even if through different circumstances. And who knows? Maybe
But
the
it is
similarities are what
incredibly improbable.
the odds
given
for
that
that
there are an
particular
infinite
universe
number
are.
of universes.
The odds that that particular universe was the one versus any other permutation isn't for all the same probability. I said maybe.
I just want to.
I'm probably given the similarities. Like there's the case to make. Oh well, we're probably closer in inverted bracket.
It could be,
inverted,
and maybe it's the
to-
similarities between the two universes that created a closer link than say one where everything
Exactly,
is
yeah.
completely different.
And I always like to make the point when you're making this argument about how can these people exist. Remember, think about how almost all life in Trek is humanoid. There's very few non-humanoid races. When scientists have pretty much said the odds of another humanoid race existing are pretty slim. You're probably going to end up with something closer to the Tholians than you are to another human being. That's just
How
what
many
math.
humanoid races have we actually seen though? Like in
Well, we
all
know
of
that
Star Trek. How
we know
many
that the
have we
humanoid
seen?
races were actually engineered to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, artificial evolution.
I would argue that until we actually find an extraterrestrial life form, that's only a theory.
But in Star Trek though, you've seen a lot of admittedly we have seen a hell of a lot of humanoid races, mainly for budget reasons and costume reasons. But we also know there are a lot that aren't humanoid. And when we look at animals on our own planet, most of them have four limbs. At least mammals, and like all mammals have four limbs, pretty much, with the odd exception. Therefore, it's not that much of a stretch to see everything most other a lot of other alien life having four limbs and a head. But then you've also got in Star Trek, we know there are lots of non-mammalian or non-humanoid animals. So, sorry, not animals, species. We just haven't really seen them because of budget, but we've been told they're there. Like, there are how many member planets of the Federation? And how many of them have we actually seen?
150? Something like that?
Probably coming close to 200 by the time of Stowe, because it was over 100 by Kirk's era.
If not,
Well, you remember
more
how
than
they
that.
used to cheat on this one with the alien race that if you saw their true form, you would go mad. This is
Oh, the
perfect
Medusa?
excuse- the perfect excuse
Gorgon.
not to show it to the audience.
And apparently small
Well,
enough to fit in a box.
Yeah, they didn't just do that with the Medusans, though. They also did that at one point with other races like the Caitians and the Kzinti. And the Caitians are, despite being cats, are still pretty humanoid, but the makeup was so complicated. Even Majel Barrett didn't want to reprise Maress in the motion picture because of it. Their response was, "Oh, that's just one of their freighters. It's been blown up." So,
Well, you remember the first appearance of the Talarians, right?
oh yeah,
The Batris. It got blown to heck by Klingons, and all the crew were dead and gone.
flash forward 3 years and they're just humans.
Well, I mean,
Well, and then you even
then later
consider
we
the Trill.
Yep. Completely
The
different
Trill
makeup
went through
for
a
no
very
whatsoever.
slight change to their makeup between
light
Next Gen and DS9.
The Trill went from looking a lot like Romulans to looking like Kryosians.
And all because they didn't want to make Terry Farrell look ugly.
As if that's possible.
You can't blame them though. You really can't.
No, you can't.
And the spots go all the way down.
Oh yes. I always preferred Esri though.
Well, they go all the way down in the Col de Boer. We're not so sure about Terry. I don't think we ever saw Terry.
Swimsuit, Ryza.
Yeah, Ryza.
Trust Cast to know about that. Like to instantly have that in his head.
You're gonna be putting the spots
PG-13.
where?
That's all right. If we had Admiral Murphy on, he'd be like passed out on the floor.
That's way too much information. I did not need to know that.
Note to self: send to Admiral Murphy.
So one thing that I didn't hear discussed in your mirror counterpart discussion is there is kind of a way to do it that I am planning to do, which is you meet them in space and you don't show them on the view screen. Just and you know, just in dialogue says, "Hi, I'm your mirror counterpart. I recognize your voice." Obviously, I'm going to write it better than that, but
Wouldn't it be better off to do it as you're hailing a planet and they're down on the planet?
Could be.
No.
But why would your mirror counterpart not be a ship captain?
Kind of like when you talk to Spock.
I do have a reasonable counterpart for the Romulan counterpart to not be a captain because their first ship was originally Devex's, so it could make sense that Devex might still be in command of the old warbird that they escaped Veronat on.
There you go.
I'm just going to say that they're dead, that they never existed. They never existed. Their entire family died half a millennia ago.
Oh,
Actually, I think several of us have probably done Mirror Universe episodes. In mine, your counterpart figured into it a lot, but you were never in the same room with each other. And you even had the opportunity to kill them if you wanted to by blasting them out an airlock.
So I'm kind of curious on something. With all of you planning to do a Foundry challenge, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely evil and 10 being the paragon of good, where does your version of the Romulan Empire fit?
11.
Ooh.
1 is evil. Wait. 1 is evil. 10 is the paragon of good.
Yeah.
And it goes to 11.
I would go.
Rogan's cheated.
I say it goes to 11 because I'm planning to have them be like good, but very, very extreme in their views.
Oh well, that's shifting back towards evil again. Unless it's like
maybe
what comes around goes
chaotic good.
I'm kind of going with the interpretation that, like I said, I went in and did the research, and I think that the Mirror Romulans are probably like it's a reversal of what happened with the Federation and the Romulan Star Empire. You know, Federation is the Terran Empire in Mirror Universe, or maybe the Romulans are the Federation in the Mirror Universe.
See, I get the feeling a lot of people are thinking that way.
Human,
So I'm going between a 6, somewhere between 8. It would differ per person who encounters them, how they would judge where they are on that scale.
Okay, not perfect, but generally on the good side.
Right.
In mine, they're going to be.
My answer be 50 Shades of Grey.
Wouldn't it be 50 Shades of Green?
50
Yeah,
Shades of
but
Grey.
no,
Oh.
they're broad spectrum. There is no combined theme at all with them. They're just, as far as I see it,
they're as diverse as humans, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. I think in STO at least, I thought that the Romulan Republic was the most human of any of the factions that are there right now.
I
that
could not agree
storyline
with you more.
Yeah,
You know,
it was a human story. It wasn't a Romulan story because the Romulans have always been shown as this one archetype, as all races have been in Star Trek, because they take on.
So you have to get across a
of-
culture in 40 minutes. They're going to have to be kind of one note.
And they give them specific things to emphasize one particular part of human nature. Like that was the whole point of Star Trek, was what they were doing. But now we actually saw this human story, this real story in the Romulan Republic, in that series, that I want to just carry on because it felt right, rather than having them all be archetypes. It just, they're just normal people.
You know, I have to agree with you, sir. That's something that came around from, that was one of Roddenberry's things, was, you know, humanity has solved all the problems. And I remember, if you guys have ever read Michael Pillar's book Fade In, there was this discussion about Roddenberry's box, that humans are perfect and don't have any of these flaws. And it gives you this, and it was something that carried over into Rick Berman's era when they did Voyager, that the human characters had to tone down their emotions to make the aliens seem more human. And I think that the two most human factions in this game are the two factions that don't have humans in it. It's the Klingons and the Romulans. They have very human stories that deal with personal betrayal and personal flaws and overcoming them to do the right thing.
Essentially, you mean like the humans of today? They're more similar to that.
They're more similar to that.
They're more relatable to the player.
Actually, that does bring up a good point, because that most of the races in Star Trek act a lot like Vulcans, and the only real way to tell the difference is that Vulcans have a weird speech quirk, and that's often the main difference between the characters.
They mention logic a lot.
Which is why everyone was so astonished when Patrick Stewart started yelling in First Contact. Like, oh my God, acting.
Which is funny, because if you go back and watch season 1 TNG, he was yelling at everyone for everything.
Shut up, Wesley.
Shut up, Wesley. Shut that noise off. Season 1, Picard was angry.
He had issues, okay.
I don't know. I am strange because, you know, I am a huge Star Trek fan, but I don't really subscribe to that Roddenberry notion of that humankind will perfect itself in a couple hundred years. I don't think that's going to happen. I always say I hope for a Roddenberry future, but I believe in a Ron Moore future.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah,
I think
DS9 changed the way we look at humans in Star Trek, because we actually saw human stories rather than just what's the alien of the week. Like we saw Earth, which we hadn't really properly seen before. I mean, we didn't see much of it in DS9, but we still saw stories taking place all over the place that involved humans or involved a different race, but they actually showed emotion. They actually showed that, okay, this isn't a perfect society, and there was money.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you can thank Ira Stephen Bear for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I will say something.
Good.
Actually, even TOS was very, shall we say, divided on whether or not they actually had money.
Yeah, because they mentioned energy credits a few times, and TOS also had the additional element that was removed from the later series of they still had religion, because there was a chapel on the Enterprise in Balance of Terror. They were having a Catholic wedding ceremony.
I don't think it was ever said that they took away religion.
That was more geared towards, you know, the old tradition of the ship captain being one of the people empowered to marry others.
Well, no, in that particular story at the time in the 60s, Catholics weren't very well regarded. There's a reason why John F. Kennedy had to make a public statement saying, "I don't take orders from the Pope if I'm going to be president." It was that was even a progressive thing at that time, whereas today it's just something we don't even notice. And I don't like that. It's one of the things I don't agree with on Gene, that we got rid of religion. I could see us maybe doing away with organized religion, but still having our faith and beliefs and stuff.
Yeah.
I think
which is why Ron brought in the Bajorans.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the Federation is that they're not going to. Well, actually, the Federation are the Borg. We all know that, but the idea behind it is that that people can still have their faiths. It's just all about everyone getting along and actually working
Being
together and
terribly
not
nice
fighting.
to each other.
Yeah, basically being British.
Yeah.
we make horrible remarks about you behind your backs, but to your face, we're lovely.
And sometimes
I prefer Australian. I think it's more accurate to describe Australian.
What you just drink and
Yeah.
have barbecues.
Who cares what
So-
you believe? Let's just have a beer and go fight a wallaby.
That was an amazing accent.
That's about it.
They repeated every time you speak now.
I call it my Woody Valley accent.
So something I will say that also I think contributes to this, and this is one of the few times I'm going to give JJ Trek a little bit of a boost. One of the reasons why I'm sympathetic towards Into Darkness was we actually got to spend significant amounts of time on Earth and just see how normal people live. And that
Yes.
was something we never saw in Trek before. Even when we were on Earth, the closest we got to seeing that was we got to hang out at Cisco's family restaurant. That was the closest we got. We never saw the random bar that the guys just went off to go drink at. We never saw what the countryside looked like. We never saw what downtown San Francisco looked like outside of that one really bad Voyager episode where they used a 1920 set.
Yeah.
Actually,
We did get to see.
I
We
love
did get
that.
to see Captain Picard's hometown once.
Yeah, that's
You
your
get
family.
to see France. You do
What
get
what
to
what
see.
what about
what a-
Beverly Crusher's ancestral manor or whatever that place was?
That was
That was
actually on a colony.
That was a colony,
that was
yeah.
a colony.
You do
It
get
was
to
Scotland on a
see
colony. It was interesting.
you do get to see Kirk's apartment that he lives in when he's on Earth during Star Trek 2.
You don't see
Picard
like
went
the
home
outside
Yeah,
world.
you don't
like,
travel
You see
around
a lot of
the
interiors.
whilst
Yeah.
in Into Darkness we saw you saw all of London in that establishing
Yeah.
shot. Like you very
Yeah,
rarely
it's a
see
very-
establishing shots like that, and we saw what people were doing just walking around on the streets, which again
You saw
we didn't
a
really see.
average civilian
Mhm.
apartment.
Yeah, and you
An
also
average
saw
civilian
like,
dog that wasn't Odo.
you also saw random people that. Well, you also saw like the average day of a Starfleet officer's life.
Yeah.
I say average day. He did blow stuff up, but you saw like him going into his workplace just as a person and things like that. It did make it human. It really did.
And then
What have you
And then
done,
we got to
Mickey?
look at
What
Benedict
have you
Cumberbatch for a
done?
while, so it's all good.
He's gone off to live with the tin dog.
there's also the fact there was also one of the things I liked was the fact that we actually got to see a bit of civilian fashion. What did we usually see when we saw Trek before that? People wearing skin tight jumpsuits that kind of made you cringe. You're like, are you sure you're allowed to see? Because I'm seeing too much of you, man.
What
now
was
we're
it?
Or weird dance
Jake
club
Sisko got
outfits.
voted like worst costume by TV Guide.
well, yeah, it's like from the Space Osh Gosh Kabosh collection. Hey, everyone gets a onesie.
Hey, just saying, I like my onesie. It is very comfortable, and I can see why people want to wander around them every day.
But no one wants to see you wandering around them every day.
Hey, have you seen me in my lion onesie? It's pretty awesome.
No,
Your
and I
one
take the
is-
stars for it.
Here's the question I have to ask though: is it two sizes too small? Because that was a recurring thing that Gene
No.
insisted on. Because because they talked about this in the TMP uniforms and the early TNG uniforms was that they had to be too small because as he insisted, it had to be perfectly smooth, and it caught the first one for the TMP ones required like 3 people to take them off just to use the bathroom, and the TNG one caused permanent damage to Patrick Stewart's back. So
Well, what they needed was a flap. Then everything would be fine. Although then it becomes long johns, so
yeah,
yeah.
but he insisted there not be flaps, there not be zippers, there
Yeah.
not be any of these things that
Well,
would be just
let's not
practical.
forget that TNG season 1 also had the scant,
And now we
which
know
is
why.
ironically one of the more requested costume items for Star Trek Online.
Yeah, but I'm
Why?
not sure anything
really-
for any good reason.
Oh,
You know,
Oh,
I
no.
know someone who really likes a scant. Apparently, actually appeared in at Vegas last year. At the
Yes, there's
and
the
I wish
graphic
I could
proof.
get that image out of my head.
you know, I personally, clearly they were wearing the scant because they needed to use the urinal, but I don't like the scants on guys or girls. I think it's unprofessional to both genders. I mean, there's a reason why women today are even drifting away from wearing skirts with their suits. It's just kind of we want something a little more unisex, and I think that would be more appropriate for a future where we've gotten past
I
all
don't know.
those past.
Pants for everyone
Well,
rather
no,
than
no,
skirts.
the idea
No,
of
just-
scant for everyone
just-
wasn't that to make it unisex that men were wearing it and women were wearing it.
Yeah,
just
it
a cool
was,
thing.
but it just seems a little out of place.
Just
more
think of
than
it as the
anything.
space kilt.
You
Seems
mean like a
silly.
kilt?
Yeah, kilt. If it was
kilt is
plaid
different.
like Scotty's, Scotty had a kilt on his dress uniform, but it was clearly a kilt, and that would have been nice.
A kilt is very much different. I am defending that as a Scottish citizen.
So, our last topic
I want a
for the
kilt.
evening, we have it's not necessarily specifically Foundry, but it could be for all we know. Season 9 is coming up. We have already seen some stuff posted on Tribble. We have the revamp of how kits work, part of which is putting kit pieces in the costume creator. Could someday get into the Foundry, who knows? The other piece is some more Undine stuff. We have an Undine Q event in which you're defending several homeworlds of the Federation and Klingon Empire, including 2 that we haven't seen before in Stowe, which is Ferenginar and Gornar.
And I would like to point out something about the Gornar. Gornar is a brand new planet model.
Well, they're all brand new planet models, aren't they?
No, Gornar, Andoria we've had for a while. Cardassia we've had. I think Ferenginar is a reuse, but Gornar is a very distinctive. You can tell it's a brand new model because it's all swamps.
Isn't Ferenginar still that as well? Or is it just
Yeah,
rain
we
all
know what that planet looks like.
Ferenginar is the Null Hut of the Star Trek universe.
Except not quite as polluted.
Armin Shimmerin called it a capitalist Seattle, so I'll take that as a compliment.
But anyway,
How is Seattle
there's
not capitalist?
It's full of hippies.
A more capitalist.
So
I don't know. I
yuppies.
mean, we haven't seen anything for the Foundry specifically yet. I think we were told at one point we might be getting some things. Ports from Neverwinter. I don't know if that's still the case.
Last we heard, they were working on it from the Gecko interview.
Yeah, like campaign support and follow author, things like that.
Campaign follow authors, yeah. And there were other things that they're working on, but they didn't want to say anything.
As you know.
Yeah, I would love campaign support.
I'd love campaign support, but what I'd love even more is, particularly after Purity, is like multiple authors in a campaign.
Yeah. That would be nice. It might be more complicated than what they can do.
Yeah,
It would be a little
more
bit,
complicated
it would
than what they'd be
involve
willing to do.
perhaps.
If I was
It would, it would involve assigning roles and things like that, which would involve more work. So yeah, but even then,
So, I mean,
hire an intern.
what do you guys think of the new tech coming to Neverwinter about the A and next button, and B about hiding missions you've already played and such?
I think I could have sworn a podcast talked about that not too terribly long ago of a dev.
I think more than one.
Next button, next button, next button, next button, next button. Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me.
Baz, remember this is a PG-13, and what you just said did not sound like next button.
I was just thinking, where's my report for spam button?
What do I think? I hope that it works without any flaw in Neverwinter, and that the reason it went into Neverwinter is because they heard us say how important it is, and the reason it went to Neverwinter first is because Neverwinter is their current child, the one that they actually care about, and they make it work there, and then they say give it to them and they'll be happy, and so it'll be less than a year that we get it. That's my hope.
The funny thing is
they have
that
the stuff there to do it straight away, whilst it will take more work to put it into STO than it would to put something into Neverwinter, simply because it's further along. It already has a couple of these other features which may well tie in, and they might be able to reuse code. So,
Plus,
once it works there, they'll bring it over.
Plus, as they said, STO is now the real moneymaker for PWE, so they're probably Foundry started out as a test bed for Neverwinter. Now Neverwinter's got to be our test bed.
Unfortunately, it's about metrics though, as far as the Foundry comes and is concerned. Well, as far as the entire game is concerned, so it's a horrible vicious circle. But
I don't know.
Essentially, if the more people that play the Foundry and the more people that create in the Foundry, the higher priority the Foundry will become. But there's the argument that I don't necessarily agree with, which is that you need that we need these extra features and things for other people to come in and play it, and it needs to be changed, blah, 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 blah. Whilst I agree with some of that, at the same time, we can make amazing things already. We just need more people to come and play it. So we need those incentives,
So I
and
think
then
it comes down to putting the Foundry in front of more players.
Yeah.
Because not enough are going and seeking it on their own.
Which is what things like this event will do, and they're looking for other ways to do it. So if you have suggestions that you've thought out, and they're not just like random suggestions that as soon as you come up with it, post it. Think about it, and if you think that it actually works from a business point of view, B, an actual player's point of view, and C, from an author's point of view, put it up. And also that it doesn't take too long to make. Like, post about it.
Yeah,
really get other
that's the sticking point. That last one.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer there though is that the frustrating thing for some people is that has already been done. Exactly what you just brought up there, Serb, has already been done, because this whole idea of the next button and properly sorting missions with proper tags, every single person that I can think of will tell you that the tagging system that they have put on STO does not work properly because they implemented it terribly. And because of that, it's
the
like,
same way that it does in Neverwinter, which doesn't work.
Right, which is terrible. which is terribly. Their tagging
Their
system does it and so what we're looking for, what I think really has been brought to their attention again and again, is we need a proper way to separate the missions that are grinders, that are story, that are combat oriented, that are, we need proper separation, and we need a better search tool for people to find the stuff that exists as it is. And I guess this is one of the things that really frustrates me, is like, we need a better search tool. And this was brought up before, I think a little bit before we were going into the show, is new website. They're directing all information, like anyone who wants to find out about the Foundry, go to the Starbase UGC website.
Don't remind me about that.
That's lazy. That's them saying that that makes me feel anyway. It may not be true that that's what they're doing, but the way that it makes someone, or at least me, feel is that they're saying they don't care enough about the Foundry to advertise it at all. The only thing they're willing to do is throw the stuff that should be work that they're doing off on the volunteer community, and that makes me feel terrible.
I really disagree with that, because I think
then
the reason they've done
tell
it
me a
is
different way to
because
think of it.
we're experienced in it. How many devs sit down with the Foundry every day, or more than once a week, or twice a week, anything like that? People, the collective knowledge at Starbase UGC in the Foundry probably outweighs every single dev.
Okay, but we're talking about it like, I totally agree with you. I see where you're going.
So we're better at making the tutorials.
Right.
We're
I
the
totally
people
agree
that
with
they
you.
should.
You're better at doing the tutorials.
We're
all
the
of
people
that.
we're the place that people should come to ask questions. We always have been.
But I
because
think
we've been there from the beginning.
But what I'm getting at,
my
my
that
point
is more of a gateway thing.
Exactly. It's a marketing thing. You go to the website for Star Trek Online and you can't find jack all about the Foundry, except for there are some spotlight missions, and go click on this website that isn't even officially affiliated with PWE in any way, in order to find out more information about the thing. It's a marketing thing. It's a visibility thing. They're hiding it behind it. It makes me
This is
feel
from the
like...
new. This is from the
From
new
the new
art
website.
site. you mean?
Yes,
The new art
yeah,
site.
you're
Yeah,
right.
under
As,
guides.
as far as that goes, that is I don't like the new Arc website at all.
Well,
I understand why they did it.
It just
It's
I feel
nice,
like they're
but-
hiding the Foundry, and what the Foundry needs, as people were saying, is it needs to be out there in front of people.
Yeah.
And there are many ways that they are putting it behind more walls for people to not see. And
I have to-
However, Arc. Remember that Arc is still very early. Even this new
Oh, yeah.
website, I mean, that only switched
Yeah.
over like a couple. So there is still a possibility, and I hope they do.
Brandon is like responding to like the people who are complaining about it and saying, well, we're telling people that want to know about the Foundry to go here, and we're telling all these other people to go to the Stowe Wiki, and it's like, all right, then where is the official PWE support and the checks that should be going to the Stowe Wiki and to Starbase UGC for doing their job for them?
Hippie. Well, one thing I have to stop you on here is that how much time and how much money would it cost them to make something that is equal to or better than what the community already has?
It's
way
not
too much.
Way too much,
But it's not really about them.
It's not about that though. The issue is there has to be at least something, just even a simple splash page that says this is what the Foundry is about. It's really telling. I'm looking right now at the arcgames.com Star Trek Online overview. This is the only place where the Foundry is mentioned, and to just give you an idea of how buried the Foundry is, it is right above the part where it talks about cryptic. You know, the one thing that people are probably not going to really read. It's the bottom thing on the features list, and it's the only one on there that doesn't even have a picture next to it.
Okay, so how about this? If any of you guys have any kind of graphic design ability, create that splash page and send it to Cryptic. I mean, that's how somebody like Thomas the Cat got hired.
That's true.
Admittedly, that's not as simple as it sounds.
No, of course it's
just
not.
because you have no idea what they even have the basis of the code in.
Mm-hmm.
No, of course it's not simple.
The problem is
it's a
now
proactive
it's not
possible solution.
Yeah, it's proactive, and that's what we have to be with the Foundry.
Let's not just complain about it. Obviously, there are deficiencies. Yeah. Let's try and figure out some way we can do something constructive to help.
You need to come up with an actual idea, and think about it and talk about it
and I agree. A splash page would be excellent.
Yeah, it would be a great idea.
I mean, they had a decent one before.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now it's not just like STO now, because now it's all of PWE, so it will be
they're homogenizing everything PWE is, so
which is something I disagree with entirely.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea in this case.
It's not nice for any of the games under their banner. It's just
well, the big it might be a cultural thing. I don't know, but but individuality is not something that's...
I think they're just trying to be Steam, and it's not working.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's it.
And PWE does not have the knowledge, particularly in the American or like the non-Asian markets, particularly. And they are trying. They don't understand the differences with Cryptic.
I don't want to.
Cryptic's old sites were fantastic, but
I think they just don't understand the opinionated nature of a Star Trek fan.
That's probably more accurate.
That's very accurate.
I just want to point out that
does anyone understand that?
Do we even understand?
We don't, because we complain about the forums all the time.
I just wanted to point out that Perfect World International, which is the Chinese company, and Perfect World Entertainment, which is a American company, are not exactly the same, and they don't. Perfect World Entertainment kind of runs independently of what EWI does. So they are,
and they have lots of Americans working for them.
Yeah, they're based out of San Francisco. No, that said,
how successful are the rest of their games though, compared to any of Cryptic's? I wonder. Well, I mean, Blacklight's fairly successful, and there are a couple of other things, but
I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that part of PW's responsibility is kind of marketing the Chinese-made games to North America. Yes. But something that they did, and this kind of spread off around the time they bought Cryptic was that they wanted to expand their library beyond just these Chinese made games.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
they're definitely trying to get away, at least somewhat, from just being the converter of content from China.
And that's kind of where this whole ARC thing is coming from. The idea is to advertise the other games to the other market. So, for instance, the Western games are getting more advertisement to the Eastern games guys, and that includes
Yeah, so
STO
far.
in there. And likewise, the hope is maybe some of us will go over there.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
know some people that play multiple of them. I just have no interest in any of the other titles because I have enough MMOs on my plate or other games of that
I play
variety on my
enough
plate
games
already.
So in our chat room, Rogue Enterprise brings up that on the product information page for Star Trek Online, the Foundry is listed as a selling point.
It is.
Then of course there's nowhere that you can go. Perhaps he says perhaps on that sort of page where the Foundry is listed as a selling point, that could be a link to the blog post or that splash page that we were just talking about, that kind of thing. So that's an approach. I like this idea that you put this many brains together, an idea might actually have merit.
And of course,
let's push that kind of idea toward Cryptic. At least let them know that. At least let Brandon know that it feels important somehow that PWE have something about these information tools on their site.
And it really is PWE. I mean, I don't think I'm going to guess that Cryptic doesn't really have any say in how this is going.
I'm certain.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm certain.
it's
Brandon
PWE.
will, but Brandon's PWE.
Yeah, I'd send it to Brandon.
Brandon is not marketing. There's a difference between community
No.
management and marketing. So
of course,
right, but
he's just the guy that we know.
Right. Well, it's more than just the guy that we know. It's as community management, he certainly does have the responsibility for receiving well thought out and well constructed community feedback and making sure that it finds its way to the right people. As a community manager, that's one of the things he does.
Technically, that should go to Smirk now. Or at least shortly, it should start going to Smirk.
Well, if it's STO specifically related.
If it's STO specific, yeah. Interestingly, Neverwinter has exactly the same issue as far as the Foundry goes on Arc Games. It's right at the bottom, and there's no link to anything else about it.
So what's Laughing Trendy's job?
I think she does a lot of the web work on the website, posting things.
As far as I know, she's just another community manager who's at least part-time helping out work.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think because Smirk is still relatively new, he's just getting help.
So here's another thing. Since this change in website, okay, so I used to, on my favorites list, have the main Stowe website, and from there I would go to the forums when I needed to go to the forums. Now I completely bypass that, and the thing on my favorites links directly to the forums. How many other guys are like that?
I'm like that now.
Yeah.
Yep. Me too.
I'm just completely bypassing the main page.
I don't ever go to the main page anymore.
Yeah,
I used to because it
Foundry.
Was, it was worth it.
I can't get information from the main page for Star Trek Online now. It's
if there's a new devlog or
something,
I got to go to the forums first and get that link.
I have no idea if it's in order or not. Like there's no.
I never even scroll halfway down, and then it's on the right to the link to the news page. It's halfway down the page, way to the right, and it's in small font. The link to it.
Yeah, I'll just say this: I use Chrome.
Yeah,
and anybody who uses Chrome, that's all you have to say.
Yeah,
because
the
Arc
doesn't work
site
great on Opera.
They do not
Chrome.
Actually, the Arc Games website has been working fairly well with my Chrome.
I was gonna say I'm on it right now, and I'm not noticing anything.
I still regularly get images that just break.
Yes, same here.
All of them are broken on mine right now.
Yeah, that's
all
what
happens. For me,
happens.
it's probably held in cache. It's just I can't get information from it at all. It's a load of thumbnails, which are all bland. It doesn't give any inkling of dates that they were posted or anything like that. It's just there's a wall of stuff. It's a wall now. It's not a list of news. It's a wall.
Interestingly enough, Cryptic Frost just chimed in on the thread, Captain Hunter's thread, about his proposal for a new search interface, and he says this thread has been brought to my attention. I have passed the info on to the team. No promises, but it has been seen.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Which we usually don't get any confirmation that anybody's seen anything that we post there. It's kind of nice to have.
No, but
yeah,
it's very
Cryptic Frost
difficult
is good
for
about
devs.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very difficult for devs of any company to go in, especially an MMO, to go in and look at forums. They have no idea where to begin unless they're there constantly.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I miss if I miss the forums for a couple of days, I'm lost entirely. I have no idea what the hell has happened in those last few days, and it gets to the point.
What are
where
people
I just have
complaining
no idea
about
to go.
today?
Exactly, and it's incredibly disheartening for a lot of people, and a lot of devs, or just people in general, just can't stand all the negativity, and they can't see. And negativity sticks with you more than positivity, unfortunately.
That's why I never read that purity feedback thread.
It was mostly good. But then you get the people like Taco, who he just wades into the thick of it and enjoys it for the hell of it, for the laughs.
And people like Patty, who was able to maintain that positive attitude no matter what.
And I'm sure he reads every post in the voice of the Muffin Man. And any of you who don't know that reference, watch broadcast
Friday.
Use UGC when it comes out. You will
Friday.
come to know the Muffin Man.
Speaking of Taco, he recently made a joke about how many players get killed on a weekly basis, which of course drove the thread nuts.
I'm gonna say something. I've noticed something in the last 3 weeks. The devs have been a lot more present. I've seen Taco in game doing Q&A like at least once a week. The devs right now are constantly talking in the Tribble forums. They're making replies to things. I think that we've had this period of quiet because they've been planning on stuff with the EP changeover.
And they've been working.
They've been working. Yeah.
They've been working.
This is probably a period
so
where
now
they've got a
Taco's
little
not doing any work whatsoever. He's just
I wouldn't say that because I'm looking at the Tribble patch notes.
They've been really active in that one.
I know. I mean, well, look just at what they did. Even beyond the revamps and stuff, look at the system powers they changed, the bugs they fixed.
Mm-hmm.
They've, big bugs. And I've been going to myself when I'm going, oh God, we're gonna have to change the running joke. It's no longer soon trademarked. It's now trademarked.
Well, that's the whole thing
with soon is now.
The art with D'Angelo, his whole thing is he wants to fix the bugs because he's coming from more of a programmer perspective. He wants the bugs to be gone, and so he's refocused things to get rid of those bugs while still continuing on content. I love Dan Stahl. He's a great EP, but I feel he's a lot more of ideas, and he wants to put more and more features in, which is not a bad thing, but it's nice to have someone that is pulling features back slightly and pushing bugs ahead.
Well, that's the thing.
Like full steam.
D'Angelo, this new patch that just came out, it's not just bug fixes. Like I said, there's new content in there, but some of it has
there is new content.
But even some of it's not even in the notes. Like, I have played that Undine Assault Cade event. They have redone the Undine again and given them a few new powers. So they're still adding new features like Stahl would do, but they're fixing them.
So I don't think
they've
that's
also
new
hired
features.
a lot of new people recently as well, haven't they?
That's where I was going to go with it, Serb, is they've hired a lot of new people, and I think that's what's going on. Is right now we have an EP that is, as you said, visibly or noticeably, not visibly, but noticeably focused on bug fixes. He has said so. Al Rivera has said so when he talks about Steven. So it makes sense that with this guy in charge, that, like you said, they're refocusing on bug fixes, right? And they also have a lot more people now than they
So
did
they can do
when,
both.
when Dan came in.
It's actually like they're an MMO studio now. They actually have a lot of people
not,
working
not just
on
some
it.
little indie people in their basement.
I know, because they keep
at
hiring all the
some
people
point,
from
like,
closed
at
studios.
points in the past,
They
Cryptic
had no cups.
was essentially an indie studio. Like the team that was on Star Trek Online, that was smaller than some indie studios I know. It's crazy. They had a tiny,
It was honestly smaller
than
than
your
the
college class.
For a
Well,
Yeah,
it
it
was
is
it was
smaller than my
smaller
unit.
than the regulars at Starbase UGC who are always
Yeah, it
in
was.
the chat room.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of us.
Yeah.
to be
I mean,
honest.
but now they've tripled or quadrupled the size of their team, and now
They're up
we're
above 100 at this point.
Oh, we're not that
Exactly.
high.
Like,
We're only
we were
about
down below
we're only at
20.
about 50-ish.
What's that?
Said we're only at about 50-ish.
Go to Cryptic site.
Oh, I may be thinking Cryptic as a whole. Maybe
Oh,
not
as a
just
whole,
Star
yeah,
Trek.
it's probably
Yeah, just the Stowe
150.
team.
Oh, Cryptic as a whole is huge now.
Okay, maybe
But
not
as
that
Primar
much.
says,
Huge
they
still.
do still have some job openings. They always have
Yeah.
job openings.
And in
Well,
content.
they've also got their new projects that they're creating, so that's driving a lot of new jobs. I am surprised though at how small their QA department appears to be.
Yeah.
Like it is tiny compared to just about any other game I know.
I have heard.
Well, no, it's not just Cryptic
that
Frost, but it's.
I have heard that it's because they're not. I mean, they don't have enough to really offer a lot to someone doing QA for them.
No,
and
QA doesn't earn money. Like, trust me, QA salaries are absolutely abysmal. They are
Yeah,
tiny,
that's what I mean.
tiny.
They're not even
they can't.
considered part of the dev team.
Yeah, they
Well,
can't
yeah,
offer what
That's what
is-
Frost told us.
Yeah, they can't. That is why their QA team is small. Is because as the company that they are, they're still small. I mean, but even though they have many more employees, they are still a small studio overall.
And I believe they're
a
contract
medium
hires.
Yeah, they're medium now, I guess. What was that,
Most
Cass?
QAs are. You're right. Most QAs are contract hires.
Mm-hmm.
They work
usually
for
at
X
least
number of months and maybe get their contract renewed and maybe not.
Yeah. Well, that's how QA works in general. Over here, it's mainly 0-hour contracts as well that they run on, and they try and keep them. I mean, we just have a talk by Sega on their QA process, but like they're huge. They have so many people.
Sega has games.
Sega has games, yes. But just Q. I'm always amazed at how small the QA appears to be, and then realize, oh, actually, we have quite a few bugs. I wonder if they're directly corroborated. I mean, we don't know how big the QA team is, but we've always had the impression that it's small.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you're talking perception versus reality is something that I have noticed in multiple games as far as QA goes. I mean, I could tell you the number in the last 2 days of posts I've read in the Old Republic forums saying this game has crap for QA. When it's BioWare and EA, of course they're going to have a huge QA department.
Oh yeah,
but even they still have bugs.
I live over by Tiburon, and they hire in 20, 30 people to work on Madden, and it still has bugs whenever it comes out. A lot of it has to also do with the perception of an industry workflow thing, where it used to be back. Some of us old timers will remember back before the internet, which is 25 years today. Woohoo!
That's older than I am.
It's as old as me.
Kid.
But regardless, there was a time when you put software out, your software was complete and bug free because there was no internet to download a patch through.
No way to patch.
Now, as the internet grew and became a bigger thing in more people's homes, software development shifted more to the put it out on schedule and patch after release. And that's kind of the workflow that things have been going through more, is that we can fix the bugs after we release it. We have to make our schedule.
I would say that software as such, non-game stuff, still tries and sticks pretty much to the idea of we want to ship something that's complete. And they have more of an opportunity to do that because they're nowhere near as complex as games are. Because games are more difficult to test, even because every player plays something differently. There's so many more options. I mean, if you've got a 3D character, you can wander everywhere. You've got to test absolutely everything, which then becomes crazy. But you're right. It's a bad. I believe it's a bad. A lot of people believe it's a bad thing. Even in the industry, people are saying it's bad that we are now releasing things with day one patches, for instance, or day two patches, or just patching forever. That there are these bugs that are coming up or have persisted a long time that are never fixed or take a long time to fix, and they've just it's a bad thing for everyone involved. And some people say it's laziness, others it's more just a result of either people not being properly trained in Q&A, because a lot of QA people don't actually have any formal training. They're just people that are brought off the street, essentially. The ones that are actually good at it, they stay around. But otherwise, you get people just wandering in, doing a couple months on it, and then going off and living their lives in something entirely different. That was a ramble. But anyway, you got my points.
I totally got your point, actually, with that. That was an awesome ramble. That was
Serb, of course, is a valuable resource because he's actually in training to do game development.
Yeah.
So he's
I'm
getting
releasing
these
my
insights.
first game, and I'm releasing my first game in 2 months. Self plug, yay!
Congrats.
The idea that people are that QA is just something that people do for a couple of months, contract for hire for however long, and then they're on to something else. What they were hoping was going to be their real job. Of course, we see a lot of stuff that is not ready to go, that is not ready to be patched.
There's a great story that I was told the other day about Crackdown 2, the game. I mean, that had a lot of problems. Was it Crackdown 1? I can't remember. It was Crackdown 1. They were once given an incentive to all the QA testers by Microsoft to say, okay, we're going to give you a bonus for every bug you find. Well, not every bug, but if you find X number of bugs, you get bonus. Like the person that finds the most bugs, they're going to stay on. They're going to have their contract renewed. What someone went and did was they went to the traffic lights in Crackdown. And if you've ever played Crackdown, you know there's a butt ton of traffic lights everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they have the lights changing, but they have nothing to do with the actual traffic. And they went from red to green. They never went to amber. But that was all by design. However, this guy went and logged a bug for every single instance of a traffic light. And there was about 800 or plus traffic lights just in the one area that he reported as bugs. And it was essentially the same bug, just repeated hundreds of times. It turned out it wasn't even a bug.
Right.
So you get people like that who are literally just in it for the money. But then you do get the people like I would definitely say that Vark and various other people and Cryptic Frost as well. They appear to actually really care about making a difference and actually making the game good,
making the game a better experience. Yeah.
Well, and I live up in Seattle, and one of my friends actually went on a tour of Valve, and so they do this on occasionally to locals. But they actually don't have a QA department. If you guys are wondering why Valve Time exists, it's because they do the programmers do their own QA, because they specifically want to avoid that. They don't want the guys who are coming in and are just goofing around. Their logic is twofold. One, we don't want just a random person off the street. Two, I can do this myself. I know the system better. I will go spend my own time and get paid to go seek out my own bugs and then fix them themselves right there, because I will know how it happened. It cuts out the middleman. So, and I wonder at times if Cryptic isn't doing the same thing and not doing very well at it. They're getting better.
There's a danger when you're proofing your own work, because
Exactly.
you know how it works. You know what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
If it's something slightly not what it's supposed to be like, you can miss it very easily. I mean, in my own work, we do a lot of proofreading, and I always have somebody else look at my work.
Oh yeah,
Because I'm going
definitely.
to skip over things.
Definitely. I definitely agree that no one should have protection from editors, and I do know that they have at least 2 or 3 other people. I know they go through and they play the games together.
Even
so they're
editors
not...
should not have protection from editors.
But people
Exactly.
have.
Right.
But the problem is everyone plays something differently, and once you go from alpha to beta to release, you go from say 100 people playing a game to 1,000 people playing a game, and you pick up more bugs. But then as soon as it's released to the mass market, you have 1 million different people playing the same game in 1 million different ways, and in ways that people that you would never even have dreamed of would have done. So
Right.
there'll probably always be bugs in games, but you're right.
There always were.
There always were, yeah. But you're right that they you can't really self-edit that easily, but it's certainly a skill that people should learn and try and do. And I agree with Valve's perspective of if it's your shit, fix it. Make sure you don't have the bug in the first place. But in a game as complicated as an MMO, that's very difficult, especially once you add more the more features you have, the more things you have to test against. So
I'd actually go with impossible. I mean, because you literally have to do a year's worth of testing for every weekly patch just to make sure every possible bug was fixed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is why
unless you had a giant
prioritize.
department.
Well, no, even with a giant department, you have to you prioritize things. You decide what's the most relevant stuff, and you have to work out what systems are related to each other, and then you go from there, and you test things that are related as a priority. And if it's not related, well, it's probably not going to affect it. But you never know. Occasionally, things crop up that something is actually related to something that you had no idea it should be. Like it has no reason to be. But it is.
And despite what people say on the forums, the triple bug testing actually does accomplish something. Because, I mean, you know, in the lead up to season 8.5, one of the triple versions actually had a bug in it that would sometimes make interior ground maps disappear, so you're walking around in this gray void where you can't see the walls and floor.
Mm-hmm.
That got squashed before it went live.
There's also
because it's actually a severe bug.
Yeah.
So
there's also something very quickly before we go off, because I know it's been a long tangent.
Yeah, we're getting close to our limit here.
Very quick before when you're talking about doing when people are talking about reporting bugs, make sure you actually tell someone everything that you did to get to that stage, and try and reproduce it before you post it. I mean, post it even if you can't reproduce it, but if you can reproduce it, that's amazing. That means that if you post the actual instructions, someone else should be able to reproduce it if they follow your instructions to the letter.
They need as much detail as you can possibly get them.
Everything,
right.
Even if it's something that you don't think is relevant, just give them everything you can.
And don't make your bug report sound like you're a huge jackass.
No, just if you can.
I mean, seriously.
You can have your own little spiel,
but make precisely sure and nicely. I mean, because there's no reason not to, and they're going to respond better, and they're going to want to fix your bug better if you're nice about it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the devs love the game. Like they work on it because they enjoy it, so they want to make it better. Also, don't tell them that their baby's ugly, otherwise they won't like you. And that's essentially what you're doing when you complain a lot. You're saying that their baby is ugly.
And on that bombshell,
complain, but yeah. I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah. Yes, shut up. There's no mute function on this where I can mute people, unfortunately.
I thought there was.
No, we can mute ourselves.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, we are up against our time limit, gentlemen. It's been a great 50th episode. I'm glad to have you all here. I mean, this is just a great time to involve as many people from the community as we could.
Hey, Drogan.
It's been great fun.
Thanks to have you. Thanks to having me. Joel, I'm True again.
Yeah, it's great being back, guys.
How do they contact us?
Throw up the contact info on the stream there.
It's up.
Why don't you take us through the spiel?
All right. So you can email us at foundryroundtable@live.com. We'll take things like reviews and suggestions, or even just thoughts on how we can improve the show. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be followed at Drogan1701. Hippiejohn can be followed at Hippie_John. And I can be followed at Greendragoon.
Well, here's to episode 51
Yay.
and more.
Here's to 50 more.
Make it happen. You had me on the show tonight.
Here's to me talking about the Vandals again.
I look forward to coming back for 1701.
Oh dear God, will we be alive then? Actually, no, that's not too far away. That's only like 4 years down the road.
Yeah,
What will Foundry be like then?
Actually, more than 4 years. What am I talking about?
Foundry will be like
a lot more.
Like
Yeah.
And,
Full
and
maybe.
then what we'll be talking about then, like, you remember when the Foundry was in beta?
Now it's in gamma.
So just
And
did
on that
some
note,
quick
it's-
calculations, and it's almost 33 years to get to episode 1701.
It's taken
Uh,
just,
Oh, wow.
just a little over a year to get to this point. So, because we started in February last year.
We'll get cracking then. Carry on.
Carry
Yeah.
on.
Definitely
Alright.
want to see an episode 1701.
All right. Well, good night,
Well,
everyone.
That is our goal. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.